My name is Walter Davis. I'm with the Citizens Internet Television Network and the San Diego County Times. I'm here honored to be able to interview Congressman Bob Filner. And Congressman, I just wanted to talk to you about some of the issues that people here in San Diego have appeared to think are very important. And one of the things here that's happening in the military community, I understand that you are on the Armed Forces.
I'm chairman of the Veterans Committee in the Congress.
The Veterans Committee.
Right.
Okay, so tell me about that, sir. Briefly, what are some of your duties there?
Well, we have oversight over the budget and the operations of the second biggest government agency. The Veterans Administration has 250,000 employees, has almost a $100 billion budget, and is responsible for 25 million veterans. I mean, that's a big operation. And right now, in fact, I think the Veterans Administration, as we say, the VA, is really stressed to the breaking point. On the one hand, you have this war in Iraq and Afghanistan, which is producing incredible injuries both to physical and mental health of our young people who are serving there. And we already have 800,000 veterans from that war. And we think of it as a small war, but there's already over 800,000 coming home. And the vast majority have PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and or brain injury. I mean, it's a terrible war as far as the injuries coming out of that. On the other hand, you have soldiers from Vietnam, 35, 40 years later, with all kinds of problems that older age may bring, but also the use of herbicides in Vietnam, like Agent Orange, has produced cancers and other problems that we have to take care of. So you have both of these generations with mounting problems, and the VA was not prepared. Just like we went into Iraq without the preparation for after the invasion, we didn't prepare the VA. And so you have a lack of resources, you have kids not getting the proper care mentally, for example, and suicides are at a very high level. You don't have really the resources, and the VA does not like to turn to the community for help. It does not like to say we cannot handle the problem. Yet everywhere I go, as chairman of the Veterans Affairs Committee, the community wants to help. These young men and women who are coming home are very brave and courageous. They've done their job, and the people want to help. And yet the VA doesn't gather them in, or the resources of a community to help. So we got major problems. This Democratic Congress, new Congress, has put in $17 billion of new money over the last year and a half. That's over a 40% increase in our health care budget for the veterans. So we have the money there. Now we have to make sure that it's spent wisely, and people use it. People get the services they need. One last point on this. One of the biggest complaints that people have with the Veterans Administration, sometimes they think VA means Veterans Adversary rather than Veterans Advocate, because there's a backlog of claims for disability compensation of over 800,000. I mean, that's unconscionable in a technical society like we are to say to our veterans, many of them waiting for years for what we call adjudication or settlement of the claim. And I think we should cut through all the bureaucracy, starting with the Vietnam vets, just grant the Agent Orange claims that they've been fighting for 20 and 30 years, get them some help, get them some sense that their country still cares about them, and breakthroughs with the other claims, like the Internal Revenue Service does. The IRS used to be very dysfunctional, but when you filed a claim 1040 in April and had a refund come, you got that check in 3 weeks. But they subject to audit. That is, they'll send you your check, and they say you have to be honest because we might examine it later. We can do our disability claim the same way. Send the check out on receipt of the claim. Take as much time as you want to audit it later. Then we can get these veterans some money. They make sure they keep their homes, or get a lifestyle that is appropriate.
Wasn't it very interesting that you brought that up? I'm a veteran. I served in the U.S. Navy 25 years, and I'm 90% disabled. I had to wait 8 years to get my disability set, but the IRS is after me now. So
because you got a check for back pay, as it were.
exactly. So it causes a host of problems for the veterans. I mean, it doesn't seem like the government agencies are working together. The IRS comes after the veterans after we've been waiting so long for the VA. Is there any plan to assuage some of that? And not only that, it's further complicated by states. For example, when I came home from Bosnia, there was some other guy wearing my pajamas. Well, I had to pay my ex-wife and her boyfriend $1,300 a month to live in my house. And I had to go to charity to live as a veteran, as a retired veteran. I had to depend on charity to live. Now, what's going to happen with these Iraqi veterans? I mean, they've been over there 3-4 years, whatever, made 4 or 5 tours, whatever they've done. Their marriages are going to break up, some of them. Are there any measures to protect veterans more from the clinches of the state government and better cooperation with the federal agencies?
You know, you point out a problem that needs a lot of work. And this certainly is not a way to say thank you for your service, the way you've been treated. Again, you point out two major things. One, the time it took for you to get your claim. And as I said, we have to speed that up to make it 30 days instead of 30 years for some people. And I'm not sure of all those relationships of the money to the claims of the federal government on taxes or the state. We need to look into that more to see. I mean, somehow I guess I assumed that was tax free, but apparently it isn't. And I promise that we'll look into that in terms of that money and its relationship to other claims on it.
Well, it is tax free. What I'm saying, when they're reporting your retirement income as taxable before you get that disability through, so the IRS is looking at that as taxable income until you get that particular letter. And if that goes on for 8 years,
I see.
Then they're coming after you with audits and all kinds of things. And it doesn't seem like the government is really protecting the veterans, because your wife could be, or husband, in some case a female service members, could become a drug addict and go off and get involved with prostitution and all kinds of things. Yet the veterans are going to get slammed with having to pay the child support, alimony to these individuals, and they've already had a lot of destruction in their lives, and have to deal with that and then deal with the IRS. It doesn't seem like anybody's really helping, and I'm still suffering.
Right. And those are issues that are, people we've not put them in a comprehensive way to understand them yet. So, but I promise you that we'll be looking at that in the future.
The other things I wanted to discuss were the environment and social justice. San Diego, we have all this sunlight, yet we don't have mass transit. We're not taking advantage of the solar energy. We're not desalinating water here, which we have a water shortage. Why are we not? What kind of actions do you see going forward to change that, so we start using alternative methods of energy?
Well, that takes both political leadership at the top and grassroots sort of demand at the bottom. People have to demand that. And we have a city like San Diego that has grown very rapidly and is fairly prosperous based on certain, let's say, certain ways of doing things. For example, building suburban housing, which relies on cars for transportation and the freeways. So you've built up a lifestyle, you built a whole city around the automobile and gasoline and electricity, and without thinking too much that those resources would ever come to an end. So you have to completely think through your city again. You have to decide, for example, if you're going to have affordable housing, you've got to have more density. And more density can be built around transportation corridors, which would be serviced by mass transit. I mean, where I live in Washington, D.C., when I'm during congressional sessions, we looked for places on a subway line. That became the most valuable property. Here, nobody, even thinks about that, but it could happen if we have some intelligent planning. So you have to I think, get all levels of government represented at a summit to say, how are we going to do this 21st century right? Not based on oil, not based on the car, but based on a diverse portfolio of alternative energy sources, based on mass transit and affordable housing. That is all possible. But the community groups have to demand it, and we have to elect public officials who will provide leadership. That's very difficult. Each one of those is very difficult because campaign financing means that certain special interests tend to control who's elected. People don't sense that they have power to change things, and you have to infuse them with the sense that they do have the power. So San Diego could be the first 21st century city, but it takes a new way of thinking and some new political organization to do that.
I see. It's very difficult. I tried to organize my organization, the San Diego County Community Coalition, and people, as you say, they don't feel like they have power.
They really do, but they think they don't. And part of what organizing is people have to have a victory or two in their own neighborhood, and then there's no stopping them. I remember when I was first elected to the school board 25 years ago, I learned from certain neighborhoods that the biggest problem for families getting their kids to elementary school was that since traffic patterns had changed, there was no stop signs at the right places so their kids can cross safely. And that's the most important thing, getting your kids safe, keeping your kids safe. So, and they said they try to get the bureaucracy to listen, nobody would listen. So I arranged for the community to come to a school board meeting en masse, demand stop signs. I had lobbied and got enough votes. And then we went back to the community and had an unveiling of the stop sign at Four Corners on 25th Street and 25th and Market approximately. And there were 600 children from the school, their parents, all, and we unveiled the stop signs. We put them in a paper bags, and had a veiling, because that was the most important thing. But what the community saw was that by becoming organized and setting out the priorities for their community, they can get something done. So we sat down, and then I went to other communities. We put stop signs everywhere. And I said, what's the next thing you think you need? And they had a meeting to try to prioritize, and they realized that schools that were built in the northern part of the city had great, beautiful playgrounds that had grass. And they looked at their playgrounds, and they were dirt. I mean, it's just a different color. And they said, how much would it cost to turf our playground? Well, it cost $250,000 at the time. Not a very great sum. So they came back to the city council when I was on the city council by now. And they said, we want turf schools. And we figured out a way to fund it. But those organizations still exist that came together for their stop signs and then the turf playground, and then you move on but they saw their power. They had a victory. And once you have a victory, you're going to go further. You can't win everything, but you realize that people have a sense of power.
Well, that's a great point. I'm glad you brought that to my attention. Now, I really applaud you for your work against Blackwater. Has anyone thought about what's going to happen to the Blackwater contractors when they come back to America? I mean, we're talking about the VA being inadequate. What about these guys that are going to have PTS that are coming back that are Blackwater? They may be mass murderers or drug addicts or suicidal. I mean, we look at Mazin, the Iraqi contractor who was shot in the face by an American soldier, and he's blinded, and he gets no help whatsoever. His wife has to take him around. Is anyone addressing that particular issue?
You raise a number of issues here. Well, first of all, what the Bush administration has done, because the war is so unpopular and because they can't get enough recruits to do their dirty work, they have hired private security firms. Blackwater has become the most visible. There's other firms. I mean, we're talking about there are probably more contractors in Iraq paid privately than government soldiers. and the soldier is paid, let's say, $35,000 a year, he's standing next to someone who's being paid $125,000 a year because they privatized that aspect. Now, so the government is not only contracting out because it can't get the recruits, but it's costing us a lot of money because they have to pay top dollar to get these people, and they're unaccountable to normal both military law and to the law of Iraq. Mm-hmm. And their people do things, including shooting civilians, and have no accountability for that. Mm-hmm. But they also get shot. And it turns out that the families of employees who work for Blackwater, mm-hmm. whose children were either wounded or killed, can't get any answers from the company. They won't tell them what happened, how it happened, why it happened. They don't get any benefits like a soldier would in the armed forces. So not only have we contracted out, but the money is not going to the actual soldier, the private soldiers. They're going to the company profits because they don't get benefits, they don't get health care later, they don't, and we don't get any accountability. So it's bad all the way around. It's just bad all the way around. And mercenary armies in a democracy can really undermine our form of government. We've seen it whether you look at the Roman Republic or you look at Nazi Germany. Emperors and dictators came to power based on private armies. So my opposition to Blackwater establishing training camps here in San Diego mm-hmm. is that this is a development we don't want. Mm-hmm. We don't want a private army that will be that's trained and then will sell out to the highest bidder. Mm-hmm. And remember, we're on an international border. Mm-hmm. That's a very sensitive area. I think they're here because they want to do some private contracting of border security. And that's an issue I don't think we want to try to get into. If you have an unaccountable mercenary who shoots first and asks questions later, mm-hmm. people are in danger here. You can't tell somebody legal or illegal just by looking at them. I don't trust a private army, and so I'm going to continue to fight against them being here in San Diego.
And we saw that in New Orleans, and they were used as well. Not to harbor on the issue of Blackwater and private contractors and that, the movie Beyond Treason documents that tactical nuclear weapons could have been used in Baghdad and around the area, and that there's a saturation of radiation in the soil, and this is raising concerns that U.S. service members are radiated and they're coming back, and there's supposedly a spike in birth defects among American families right now, with the men carrying it in their semen and then passing it on to their wives. Is our government looking at that?
Unfortunately, this government has a very unproud tradition of putting its young men and women in dangerous situations, not telling them the danger, and then not admitting that there was any problem later, and taking decades and decades to come to some justice. We put young men and women to test weapons, atomic weapons in the 1940s and early 50s. Didn't tell them there was any problem. They all have cancers. We didn't tell the Tuskegee population about the medicine that we were administering to them. We didn't tell the soldiers in Vietnam about the herbicide. We didn't tell the present soldiers about depleted uranium, which is one of the causes here. They're very effective bullets made out of some form of uranium, which is great for shooting into a tank, but also has when the projectile disintegrates, radiation is there, and people are exposed to it. And when we were in Kuwait, we didn't tell people about the chemicals that were being used. So there's time after they first, I said, deny that there's anything going on. Then once you find out some essence of it, they cover up. And then maybe years and years, decades later, they admit there was maybe a problem and we better try to take care of it. But meanwhile, we have destroyed individuals, we have destroyed their families, we have hurt our nation by not coming clean on this stuff. And apparently both the Department of Defense and the Veterans Administration would rather kill these young people than come to grips with the admission that they have harmed them. I find it very, very, I find it criminal, disgraceful. We see it. I mean, I read about some of the historical things, but I see what's going on is we don't admit that the soldiers have post-traumatic stress disorder, and we give them other diagnoses, or we don't have room, or we don't have enough resources to give them mental health, so they commit suicide. I mean, this is disgraceful, and we're fighting a war that's costing us $1 billion every 2 days, and yet we won't take care of the young people when they come home. That's not a sign of a great nation, and we have to do better.
I have two very important questions I want to ask before my time runs out. You mentioned the $2 billion a day, every other day, whichever it is. Our infrastructure is crumbling. Bridges falling down. Our water systems aren't working. We're laying teachers off here in San Diego County, 700, I believe, the last time that I heard. It appears as though the military-industrial complex is unchecked in terms of what they're spending. The prison and military-industrial complex is unchecked. I hear that there's not money for domestic programs yet. I don't hear any cutbacks in terms of spending money on military weapons at the cost of our society. What is your take on that, sir?
Well, I think you put it exactly right. And these are political questions in the highest form. That is, they involve priorities of a nation. And the priorities come out in budgets and come about because of elected officials, presidents, congresspeople, city councilmen. And certainly for the last decade, well, it goes back way farther than that, but we are putting virtually all our money into war, which is not a very productive thing in general. It makes a few people rich, but impoverishes the rest of the nation. We have enacted tax policies which give enormous amounts of money to the very wealthy, and leaves the middle class and working people without any benefits. So they're paying a much higher percentage of their income for taxes than, say, wealthy people are. And then we say, sorry, we have no money for education, environment, healthcare, veterans, the people programs. And this is a well executed policy by the people who put Bush in. They've done and who had Reagan earlier, and then the Democrats have tried to dig our way out of the mess that they put us in. We now have a $10 trillion debt. These are the fiscal conservatives that so they all say, oh, how can we put money into education? We got a $10 trillion debt. Well, the $10 trillion debt comes from the war and the tax policies. And all those are political questions. I have a sense in the coming election, with Senator Obama as the Democratic nominee, that we're going to have a major change. I think he's going to be elected president. But then that doesn't mean politics comes to an end. People still have to organize from their local to make sure Senator Obama moves in the right direction and changes these priorities that we're having. We are the richest nation in the history of the world, and yet we have dropouts at an incredibly high rate. You look at the prisons, as you mentioned. If someone came here from Mars, they would think we have a policy to put every young black man and Hispanic man in jail. I mean, that's what it looks like, I think, to someone coming from outside. The numbers are, tell the story. How can we say, and yet this is the richest country, because our priorities are not only misplaced. I mean, that's almost a trivial thing to say. They are criminally placed, because we are killing some people and making other people incredibly wealthy and have a wonderful life. Meanwhile, others are struggling just to keep their head above water. But it's only politics, and the same people who argue for the stop signs I talked about have to be involved in changing those priorities. And they get educated when they're fighting for the stop signs about what the political system is, how they can change it. When I was in college, I was 17 years old, and I participated in the Freedom Rides in 1961, and which had people breaking laws of segregation. This was in Mississippi, taking the consequences of that by going to jail. And I was a couple months in jail, but then challenging those laws in courts. And eventually, the Supreme Court struck down legal segregation. I saw if you get involved, it wasn't the safest thing in the world, but if you get involved, you can change the history of our country. And that gave me an optimism and confidence about change that I see in Senator Obama when he talks about change. He's right. If we get together, we can do anything. And I think that's going to really inspire the younger people in this country and us older folks to change things.
Well, the irony is that I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, and I'm a survivor of the 16th Street church bombing, where Condoleezza Rice went to church. So I know fully what you're speaking of. On that same note, in 1973, they came out with the schedules for drugs. And so Schedule 1 drug being something that's not useful, if they have marijuana, for example, as a Schedule 1 drug. And people are now viewing this war against drugs as basically a war against the American people. We have more people incarcerated in this country than any other country in the world. China, Iraq, Iran, Russia, according to the Pew report that just came out. So it appears, and I don't see crime rates dropping. And I'm hearing John McCain talking about arresting more people and building more prisons. I'm sure the concrete industry is behind this. The pharmaceutical industry is behind this. The private security companies are behind this. Are there movements afloat within Congress now to look at reforming the drug policies? To decriminalize drugs so that so many people aren't getting incarcerated?
When you take a subject like that, I would have to say, in general, politicians are timid. You don't see them leading the parade. They wait till the parade is there and then they get to the head of it. And if they're going to move in the direction of a more rational, sensible policy on drugs, the war on drugs has been a complete failure, and you can make an argument that much of the crime in the nation is coming from the criminality of the drugs, but there's got to be a support system for politicians to look to. You can't expect them. You should expect them just to exert leadership, but the way the system works, there has to be some support mechanism for them. So the people have to sort of demand it and show that if you take that position, you're not going to be completely isolated, from other things. But looking at education in a different way, looking at healthcare with universal access, looking at housing and job development. When you look at all those things, you're going to, vastly reduce crime in any case. So it's a whole program that you have to look at, not just a little piece of it. I was with in South East San Diego today with a group of neighborhood councils who have determined that their children are not going to be in gangs. They're going to learn about leadership. They're going to learn how to. They're forming youth councils so they understand how to operate together and how to put pressure on their city council and their government. One council, the Broadway Heights Council, in fact, took 20, 30 children on a tour across America to look at the civil rights sites so they knew their history and how some of this stuff didn't just happen, but people sacrificed for it. So there I see an incredible optimism about change. And I was able to get some money from the federal government, about $250,000, to help them do that. And that will change our city, which will change our nation. That they're going to press, and they may come to understand these issues about drugs are part of it. But you want to keep them out of gangs. You want to get them the education. You want to get them to understand how they work together in a group. And I think we can do that. And again, I was a student when John Kennedy was elected president in 1960. And his policies weren't well thought out. I mean, he didn't have a whole program, and he was not that progressive a person. But his youth and his attitude changed America, really. People had more excitement. I think part of the civil rights movement was based on enthusiasm of young people to get involved. And I think you're going to say the same thing with Obama, and I think then the issues will be defined differently, and I think we'll move in a very positive direction.
So it seems all the questions seem to come back to the community really taking some initiative and really surging forward in order to support the elected officials.
But the officials will respond. And I think that's what the success of Obama had in the primary campaign that we just went through. He based his whole campaign on empowering his local supporters, whereas Mrs. Clinton came at it from the top down, and the bottom up worked. And if they stay as organized as they were, they're going to be pressuring him to stay, to stay clear to his own, to stay loyal to his own stated goals, because politicians can change, even Mr. Obama. But with his grassroots there to keep him honest, I think he will be very successful.
Well, I'm very happy that we did this interview, because this has really enlightened me that what I am doing is correct. And that's trying to build these grassroots entities. And this will give me further ammunition to push these people further to join together to realize our power. Because that, in a great measure, is what I can tell from talking to you, that has a great deal to do with what your power is.
There's no question. I mean, I don't have any without them, but I see my job as empowering communities and people. It makes my job both simpler and harder. Simpler in that local communities define their agendas. I don't have to do it, and they don't best. It's harder because they demand accountability from me, because if you can define your priorities, politicians can't double talk you. If you're clear about them, they have to be accountable, or you get rid of them. And it's as simple as that. But people have to get organized, and people have power still. This is still in the most open society in the world in terms of people able to exercise power. But most people don't know that or believe it, and therefore they opt out, and that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You don't think you have power, you don't do anything, well, you don't have power.
Well, you should look at Zimbabwe now and see what's happening there, for example.
Well, thanks so much, and I think we have a lot to do, but I'm pretty optimistic about the future.
Great. Well, I wish we had more leaders like Congressman Filner. I mean, obviously, you care about people and objectives, and I really appreciate the honor of the interview, sir.
Thank you, sir.